All right. Well, good afternoon. I got to tell you, today is one of those days that made me want to be Attorney General. I started out this morning at the Volunteers of America breakfast, where they talked about the amazing work they're doing at addressing the opioid crisis, helping pregnant addicts give birth to healthy babies, and helping our veterans who are suffering from homelessness. I then got to go to a UAW event for their retirees and talk about scams and how we can protect, especially our seniors, from scams. And now I'm going to get to make an announcement that I am so excited about that's going to mean justice for people who have waited far, far too long. So over the past 22 months, I've dedicated myself to standing up for and protecting Kentuckians who need our support the most, to give voice to the voiceless. Every day in this office, we go about doing that by following a four-part mission. That mission is the prevention and prosecution of child abuse, better protecting our seniors against scams and abuse, seeking justice for victims of rape and sexual assault, and finding workable solutions to this drug epidemic that plagues each and every one of our communities. Every day, the employees of the Attorney General's office come to work to change what I believe is unquestionably a rape culture here in Kentucky and throughout America. We know that nearly 1 in 2 Kentucky women will suffer some form of sexual violence during their lifetime. 1 in 2. I'm a son, I'm a husband, and I'm a father of a 7-year-old girl. And both I and every employee in this office are committed to changing that culture. We will not accept our status quo. Yet, when I came into office, we had over 3,000 safe kits that had been languishing in police departments or in the crime lab, either having never been submitted or sitting there because there was a lack of resources. And they weren't just boxes on a shelf. They represented survivors, real people who had suffered real pain and gone through a heinous crime. But we made progress, and we did it together. KSP secured nearly $2 million in private funding through the Manhattan District Attorney's Office to start testing those 3,000 backlogged kits. And my office worked with advocates, survivors, and the General Assembly to pass the SAFE Act to ensure that all safe kits, now and in the future, are submitted and tested on a timely basis. And we got some justice on one of the best days that I've had in this office, when Michelle came in here and helped us transfer $4.5 million of settlement funds. Not a dollar of that were tax dollars to our state police crime lab, because that's every dollar they said they needed to hire more people, train them, and buy more equipment so the state would never, ever have a rape kit backlog again. That was a proud and meaningful day for this office. It meant now, any victim, any survivor who has the courage to pick up that phone and is willing to go through the most invasive forensic exam we could ever ask is guaranteed to have their kit tested. But when you're committed to cultural change, you've got to keep working. So we committed another $1 million to provide critical training for local law enforcement and prosecutors who seek justice for those whose courage had been locked in a box on those shelves for far too long. We provided training all across this Commonwealth that focused on a victim-centered approach, so that when that person has the courage to make that call, they believe 2 things right away. Number 1, that we believe them, and number 2, that we're going to seek justice for them. We started the Voice of Justice video contest at our universities to raise awareness for the epidemic of sexual assault on college campuses and to encourage active bystanding, to not be passive, to protect your friends, your family members, and your neighbors, that you have a duty to step up, to say something, and for us to protect each other. And we even sued universities that were unwilling to be accountable for the assaults and/or harassment alleged against faculty members or administrators. We created the Attorney General's Survivor Council, a group of 27 of the strongest, most courageous people that I've ever met. All survivors of violent crimes, including sexual assault and rape, to assist and advise our office and to push for change, whether it's policy or cultural. This week on Monday, we were at WKU's campus, and on Tuesday, we were at Morehead State's campus, with forums and events pushing to change culture there. These efforts have helped us make some real progress. But today, I am so excited to announce our next step towards truly securing justice in dealing with these backlogged safe kits. And it proves that testing the kits was just the beginning. Today I'm announcing that the United States Department of Justice Bureau of Justice Assistance has awarded my office a nearly $3 million National Sexual Assault Kit Initiative, or SAKI grant, to secure justice for victims of sexual assault. With these funds, the Attorney General's office will establish a sexual assault cold case unit dedicated to investigating and prosecuting the backlog cases while providing needed services to survivors who have waited far too long for justice. This unit inside the Attorney General's office will include 4 funded positions that include a victim advocate, investigator, prosecutor, and SAKI coordinator. Just think about the good that this newly established SAKI unit will do. Think about the justice that they will secure. The grant will also allow us to fund an additional Kentucky State Police cold case unit sexual assault detective. It'll provide additional boots on the ground with our important partners. And it will fund the KSP Crime Lab to test up to an additional 1,500 kits. That's 1,500 survivors of one of the most heinous crimes that for whatever reason, their kits weren't included in that original 3,000 count, but who deserve justice just the same. Some of these kits, called boomerang kits, had been sent to the lab, not tested for various reasons, and returned to law enforcement agencies. But with this grant, which allows us to test 50% more kits, we are going to get on the path to justice for those survivors. Additionally, the grant will support the Kentucky Safe Kit Backlog Research Project at the University of Louisville. This project will examine the outcomes of kit testing, identify data-driven, victim-centered responses to sexual assault, and provide justice to victims. It means we're going to be accountable at how we go about investigating, how we test these kits. We're going to be accountable in everything we do so that we can ensure that this never happens again and that we start changing that culture. This grant is one of 20 national SAKI grants and one of only 7 statewide grants. I am deeply grateful to the Department of Justice and to Attorney General Jeff Sessions for this grant. I pledge that every safe kit, every single one, will be tested. And where there are hits, where there is evidence, we will seek justice on behalf of every single survivor. It is no less than they deserve. And we won't stop until every survivor secures some form of justice. Because our goal in the end is to secure that justice for folks, but also change this culture. I believe in a world where sexual assault does not happen. Today, we're taking a step towards building that world. I believe it's possible. Now we got to go out and do it. Thank you. And with that, I think we're starting with Brad. Sure.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me have a chance to speak today. As the Attorney General said, we're continuing a research project through the University of Louisville to look at the outcomes of these kits and all of the reform that's going on in Kentucky. So I am extremely grateful to be a part of this new SAKI project in Kentucky. The funding is going to give us the resources to employ a longitudinal study or research design that's going to assess the impact of not only testing the kits, but also the innovative reforms that have come through in Kentucky on SB 63 and the effect of those on sexual assault in Kentucky. The funding allows us to add several long-term data collection components to the baseline data that we're continuing to collect. from the initial contract through the Attorney General's office. These data provide us a unique opportunity to assess how Kentucky's innovative efforts affect policy and practice over an extended period of time. Through the SAKI funding, our work is going to not only provide some answers and hopefully some data-driven policy and things like that for the Commonwealth, but also it's allowing us to cooperate with several other jurisdictions throughout the country who are dealing with this issue and who are also researching this issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for everyone for coming, and to the Attorney General, and for this SAKI grant. It means a lot to me, as I know it does to a lot of other survivors that I know. When I first started this journey, the thought of one box sitting was one person too many for me. That was one person that was waiting for justice. I couldn't imagine when we got the numbers in and they were over 3,000. And now thinking of more numbers that were found after that initial number was known. To me, because I think about all of the crimes that also match those kits, we're just thinking about that survivor and that offender, that perpetrator. But I think about what other crimes did that perpetrator do? And when we test these kits, how many crimes is that going to match? Mm-hmm. How many crimes did they get pled down on? How many crimes were they never brought in on? How many crimes were committed and they were out on the streets because we didn't test that one kit? Now imagine thousands of those. With Kentucky being one of the highest for stalking, with Kentucky being also one of the highest for child abuse, we're also pretty high up there in trafficking. I just start to think about all the states around us that are creating laws and that are creating better protocols. I like to think that my state of Kentucky is now doing something that we're in the forefront. We're not the last. We're not the last to implement. We're not the last to pass a law. We are now creating change, and we are in the forefront of that. I mean, I just think about when that came out and saw that one of 17, that we actually got this grant is amazing to me. So I just think of all the change that's going to create, and for me, justice looks different for every survivor. But I've said it before, but justice should be the default and not the rarity, and that's what we're talking about today. So thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. So as you see, we've had a number of very important partners in securing this grant, the Kentucky State Police being a great partner that we work with, U of L, but I finally want to give my heartfelt thanks to two folks from this office who really helped push and are responsible in large part for us securing that award. That's Gretchen Hunt, who heads our Office of Victims Advocacy, and John Moberly, who heads our Department of Criminal Investigations. So with that, we'll take any questions. Adam?
These boomerang kits that you talked about, so the original audit and found some of these kits that were backlogged. I think it was like 3,000
Yes.
or so. So these are kits that were not part of that.
Correct.
But there are kits that have been sitting for a long time.
That's right.
I was unaware. What does that mean?
Well, there were different criteria when they were doing the initial audit that you had to fall within. Sure. Yeah. Laura's the expert.
So originally there were more kits than what was included in the audit. So there were additional kits that came in closer to about 3,500. And then what we call the boomerang kits, these are kits that, due to the backlog, we generally tell law enforcement for any crime type, whether it's a drug case, whether it's an arson case, any type of crime, if you've submitted it to the lab and it's either the charges are dropped, prosecution declined, or somebody's already taken a guilty plea before we ever do the analysis, contact us and we will ship it back unexamined. We're not going to waste the resources to work on a case that will not be processed in court. And a lot of that is with the drug cases and the toxicology cases. But it affected the DNA cases as well. So when we would get that information, there were a lot of cases that had been started but never completed. The law enforcement agencies submitted them on time as required. We got them into the line. We started working them. We heard that it wasn't going to go forward, so we sealed it back up and we shipped it back to the agency. We have been pouring back through both electronic and paper and microfilm records, and we're back into the 1990s right now, and contacting agencies and saying, you submitted this kit, we started it, do you still have it? We want it back. And we expect to get probably over 1,000 of those kits.
So these were cases that were dropped for whatever reason,
Yes,
primarily?
yes.
And since so you said, well, if you're not pursuing charges or the case is not being investigated, we're not going to.
Correct. They're the next case right here. They're hollering for results.
Right.
We're going to pick that up and work it instead. So we did. We went ahead, shipped them back. We want them all back now because a lot of those cases that were like cases declined prosecution because the scenario was not something that was going to work well in court. It was going to be a tough case. So what happens now if we work that case and it links up to 6 other cases that were also declined? You now have a six cases with one suspect. You have a much stronger case. Or let's say you have a strong case, but the victim says, I don't want any part of this. I don't want to be involved at all. What if you run that one? And when we enter the DNA, it hits to a case where there's a victim who does want to proceed, but they needed a stronger case. So now you've got a victim here that may be able to help this other victim and get both of them to come forward. So that's why we want them back. Even though on their individual merit, they may still not go forward, at least the victim knows, or the survivor, excuse me, knows that their kit was tested, but potentially it could push a kit to go forward through the system that in the past would not
Do
have.
you expect to have about 1,000 of those?
About 15, well, about 1,000 is what we're estimating, plus about a 500, right around there that
So the grant should
above.
cover the test for all of them. There's about 1,500.
Yes.
We're pretty excited about that.
So you have 1,500 in that, and there were roughly 3,500 or so with the others, so we're talking a total of 5,000 kits now.
Yes.
How are we doing on the original kits, by the way?
They have all been tested. There were 3,173 that were shipped out to a vendor. They've all been tested, and the vendor has returned all the data back to us. We then have to conduct a triple review of every single lab report to make sure that they followed all the protocols and everything's the way that it should be. We have gotten through about 970 out of the 3,173. From those, we have put into the database about 300 DNA profiles, and we've gotten hits back on about 130 of those.
Did you have any criminal proceedings go forward with those?
We have.
Would you like to answer that?
Sure. Our first indictment occurred in Jefferson County. It's an indictment that the Commonwealth Attorney's Office is moving forward with, and my understanding is it deals with a serial rapist. This is exactly the reason that we need to secure justice for the survivors represented by these kits. It's also going to protect other people going forward.
Is it just one indictment or is there others?
I've seen the one at the moment.
There's other active investigations.
Right, right. And that's the, understand that these are cold cases, and so when a hit comes back, it requires an investigation be started from that moment. And it takes time for law enforcement to build the case, contact the victim, work through it, and then those charges to be filed. But as we move forward, you are going to see numerous prosecutions.
So is that what the connection to this cold case unit that you're starting? So you envision this unit as taking on some of those investigations?
Absolutely. You've got a number of situations where those cold cases could be in areas that may have one detective for an entire county. And they might not have the training in either cold cases or sexual assault cases. Those are cases that this unit's either going to be able to help on or take on itself. In a world right now where we have scarce resources on the prosecution and the investigation side, these are going to be dedicated people every day that all they do is work on these backlog cold cases. That we are truly being able to put our resources now to help those who have waited for justice the longest, far too long.
How many personnel will be in this new unit?
Well, in our unit in the AG's office, it'll be 4, an investigator, a prosecutor, a victims advocate and a SAKI grant coordinator that's going to work on statewide coordination of a lot of these issues. Then there's going to be an additional detective hired through the grant for KSP, and then there's additional funds to assist with the lab.
See here, I'll look through, I'll think of it later. I just.
Okay, we'll get back to you. Anybody else?
Can the three of you please, just, say your name and what agency you're with so that I have that recorded?
Brad Campbell, Department of Criminal Justice at U of L.
Michelle Kuiper, and I'm a survivor advocate and the co-chair of the Survivor Council.
I'm Laura Sedkamp. I'm the lab director for the Kentucky State Police.
Laura, can you spell your last name, please?
It's S as in Sam, U-D-K-A-M-P.
Any other questions on this? K-A-I-P-E-R?
Kuiper.
Great. If those are the last questions on this, I'm going to let these folks.
The cases that were the boomerang cases that you all talked about, are you afraid that there may have been some since there was no prosecution and, you know, victims have
I think
been destroyed?
I think unfortunately, as we look in the past, there were kits for whatever reason that ended up being destroyed. It shouldn't have happened, but we're committed to making sure it never happens moving forward. This funding, which can fund up to 1,500 additional kits, we're going to use to make sure that we fund up to 1,500 additional kits. Boomerang, otherwise newly discovered, we're going to make sure that everybody who has a kit that's out there that is still in existence, that goes and gets tested. And I love that it's a collaborative effort. I mean, the lab is working hard. We were honored to be able to provide a little bit of those resources. We'll have additional help at KSP. We'll have our cold case unit here. This is one area right now where I believe our government is operating together in the way it should be. All right. Thank you.